All right, here's the left again bragging about Obama's victory in more employment or more jobs. This isn't more people employed, this is more jobs. And I'm going to explain this after he's done with his spiel because this is just a tricky way of saying, that Obamacare and the economy worked well under Obama, which is not the case. We'll talk about first Obamacare, which then caused the rise in jobs, which isn't a good thing, and I'll explain that too. And then I'll talk about quantitative easing, which was a $4.5 trillion gift to the rich by Obama. Basically, no strings attached gifts to Wall Street. Let's go into Cuomo here and see what he has to say, though. Let's see.
Start with the suggestion that I don't know that a strong economy makes up for calling a black woman a dog, mitigating the immorality of white power, putting kids in cages. After all, America is a country, not a company, right? The bottom line only justifies so much. It certainly shouldn't be as important as our reputation for decency and freedom. But let's deal with this claim about the economy that Trump makes so often. Let's fact check this prophylactic, this protection he uses every time he says or does something that makes America wince.
We have the strongest economy that we've ever had. We're setting records on the economy. We're setting records. The massive tax cuts and all of the deregulation has really kicked us into gear. Black unemployment, the lowest in history. Hispanic unemployment, the lowest in history. The economy is maybe better than it's ever been. The numbers are coming out the best they've ever had, so we're very happy about that. And I think for that reason, I think in November we're going to do extremely well.
All right, so let's talk about the facts. The economy grew at a 4.1% rate in the second quarter. That is the fastest pace that we've seen in nearly 4 years. Trump says the fastest ever. Wrong. Not the fastest ever. Not better than Obama ever did. The national unemployment rate, all right, fell to 3.9% in July. But take a closer look at that rate. It is better now, but it's part of a steady decline since 2010. Again, don't buy this idea that Trump made everything change. And remember this, Trump used to mock this rate, the unemployment rate, under Obama. He used to say...
So now look at this. He goes to January of 18, and this was just released a couple of days ago. It doesn't go any further. A lot of growth has happened in Obama or in Trump's first year. But it took, those deregulations and the tax breaks to take effect before the economy started picking up again after the huge decline under Obama. So now we've got huge growth. The stock market is actually at the highest it's ever been. The Dow and the NASDAQ have, top marks on growth in all of history. And I'm going to get into this. So with the job thing, I just want him to make a few points.
It's not the real measure of the job market. Why? Because it doesn't include those who are working for less money, who are working just as temp workers, or who just quit looking for work altogether. That's all part.
Okay, so all of that's true, but the one thing that he missed out on, I'm going to point out, is that under Obamacare, the companies with more than 50 full-time employees were required to provide health care for their employees. So a lot of employers laid off because they had more than 50 employees full-time, and they hired back double the part-time workers. So more jobs were created, but not more employment. It was about the same employment, but there was more jobs because there were people taking jobs with no benefits that paid less because they could only get part-time work under Obama. I mean, it wasn't, everybody, but by and large, these companies with more than 50 employees wanted to dodge that bullet under the Affordable Care Act, which was a provision that was supposed to kick in the last year of Obama's presidency. And so that provision's been nullified, I believe, or is in the process. So let's just go through this a little bit more. I'm going to answer some more of his false claims.
Part of underemployment versus unemployment. And you know what? He was right. So why isn't he telling you this number right now that includes all those folks? 7.5%, almost twice the rate that he's boasting about now. Why?
because the regulations on Obamacare have been teetering and have not yet been nullified completely. So there's still things like that that are lingering that penalize employers. Like for myself, I mean, I didn't directly get affected by this. My injuries from my car accident caused my lack of employment, my early retirement. But I worked in the medical device industry, selling robotic automated pharmacy equipment, and there was a tax on medical devices that was supposed to help pay for Obamacare. And the industry that I was in laid off over 300 employees. The company that I was in, it was the fastest growing company in Seattle. And, there's tons of huge companies there like Microsoft and such. But this was the largest growth company in Seattle when I got hired in 2008. And in 2009, after Obama started proposing the Affordable Care Act, a bunch of people were laid off in 2010, over 300 people. If I remember correctly, it was 354. But you can look it up. I mean, look up the Talyst layoffs, TalYst Inc. Look up their layoffs, and that was shortly after Obama got elected and started announcing the provisions of the Affordable Care Act. So let's just go on to what he says here a little bit more.
Because he's looking for an easy score. That's why. And here's why it matters, okay? The numbers don't tell what matters most. Growth is only as good as the people growing with it, right? So, is it the working class people who voted for Trump? Not nearly as much as it is the rich people like Trump. Few pieces of proof here, all right? The gap between the 1% and everybody else growing. See this part going like a Y this way? It's the wrong way, right? You want it to go.
All right, so look it up, like I mentioned about quantitative easing, look up the $4.5 trillion gift to the rich. The New York Times posted on it. Washington Post, before it was bought by Jeff Bezos, was reporting on this. Obama gave the rich $4.5 trillion. Wall Street got a huge bonus, no strings attached. They got $80 billion a month under Obama. And the wealth gap grew under Obama because of that huge infusion of money to the wealthy. And so, yes, they have reinvested and they've continued to grow that wealth, but they got that wealth for free from taxpayers. And now we're paying the bill. And that was because of Obama and the Federal Reserve.
Go the other way, it's getting bigger, okay? Big reason for that, wage stagnation for most Americans. Investors in the market, killing it. But paycheck people?
Right. So he's talking about inflation here. Again, that has to do with the Federal Reserve, interest rates, and inflation of money supply. So when they printed out that $4.5 trillion to give to the Wall Street bankers, that increased inflation. You look up the inflation rate from Obama until Trump, usually inflation's at 2%. It went up to almost 5% under Obama.
Something different. According to Pew Research, our average wage has the same purchasing power now as it did 40 years ago. $23 an hour now, same as $4 in 1973. But now there's this new pat in the back that they're doing. New pat on the back about what works and what doesn't. This is just a quick look for you what happens in terms of income and tax cut. You see how much you get when you make more? Or now they pay more, but still, is this a middle-class tax cut? Do they get...
So he admits that these employers are now paying more and that people are getting more money on their paycheck, but then says, oh, well, look at what the top 1% get, $51,000 tax deduction. Look how many millions of dollars they're paying out of their income a year compared to the zero that the bottom 50% are paying, basically. So the top 50% of income earners, basically, those that, are heading towards the 1% or in the 1%, but those that are above the middle class or the upper middle class and the rich, they pay 97.2% of all income taxes. The bottom 50% pay 2.8% of the income taxes. That's a real number. You can look that up.
The majority of the benefit? No. How people of color are treated. This is this new part of the riff of let's look at the economy. The president...
Okay, before he goes into his spiel, look at the downward trend there. That all started under Obama, and it's certainly continued a little bit under Trump until, if you look at the end, and he's only going to January of 2018, it starts to rise under Trump. So he's not giving the full picture here. He's giving the slant of what happened under Obama and is blaming it on Trump.
Can't be racist, Look at how black unemployment is doing under Trump, better than under Obama. That's their basic argument. Take a listen.
When President Obama left after 8 years in office, he had only created 195,000 jobs for African Americans. President Trump.
Most of those were part-time jobs, and those jobs were not representative of individuals being employed. It was individuals working multiple jobs for the most part.
In his first year and a half has already tripled what President Obama did in 8 years.
All right. Now, that's not true. Okay, if those stats sounded too good, it's because they were. But don't be surprised. Sarah Sanders apologized, but what they don't apologize for is exaggerating everything for effect about the economy. Here's the truth of those numbers. As I told you, overall unemployment has been dropping. It's the same for black workers. Everybody has been getting less unemployment.
And it seems funny that it all happened under Obama. Look at the short time span in the red for Trump, and look at the long-term span under Obama. And where it was very high under Obama when he started, in 2009, it dropped significantly as he was president.
But let's look a little bit more closely, okay? 6.6% for black Americans, 3.4% for white Americans. So, lowest rate ever sounds like something to boast about, but not when you consider the disparity, because this is the challenge, okay? 48% lower than it is for black Americans.
Which the, racial gap for black unemployment and for black wealth dropped significantly more under Obama than it did under George Bush. And now it's rising under Trump. But, he's had less than 12 months from this graph that they're showing to even reverse the stuff that Obama did. 1 year is not enough.
Unemployment. So the falling tide is helping everybody, but he hasn't done anything for them specifically. He hasn't done anything for the workers specifically the way he promised that he would. 80 cents of every dollar of that tax cut went to the top 1%. Now, you could say, well, that's okay. They pay the most, like I said earlier, but that's not what he called.
Oh, wait, don't they pay the most? So the, top 1%, actually the top 1% themselves pay over 40% of all income taxes collected. The top 50% are paying 97.2% of all income taxes collected. The bottom 40% they actually have a negative number. They're paying negative 3%. So they're getting more back than they paid in. So after all year, you haven't paid any taxes in because you're taking all your exemptions. And then you get the child tax credits, the earned income credits, and all of this. People like myself actually get more back than they pay in. I've always gotten more back than I've paid in because I've always been in a tiny little tax bracket. I've been in the bottom. So at least, in the middle, I've never made more than $110,000 a year. Yet I've always gotten more back than I've paid in. That's the same for most people in the bottom 40%.
He said it was for the middle class, okay? So blacks are not improving relative to whites. That's the challenge. All right, so the lesson is...
Your graph didn't even show that, Cuomo.
When the White House tries to get away from the latest embarrassment of pulling clearances, let's say, by pointing to the economy, remember what they are not telling you. Often, that's the most important.
So they're telling you the truth. The point is that Obama spun this when he created more jobs, but what he didn't leave in the sub notes in the tiny print, he didn't describe that the reason why there was more jobs is because there were more people getting laid off from full-time positions and taking twice as many part-time positions to make up for it. So under Obama, more people were employed with multiple jobs, compared to Bush or even now with Trump, because of the Affordable Care Act that penalized employers that had more than 50 employees, that said if you have more than 50 employees, your full-time workers must be covered, have insurance coverage paid by you. So they laid off their full-time employees. They hired twice as many part-time employees. But under Obama, there had been no more people in the United States that had been out of the workforce than ever in history. And, it was a significant number. So there were more people out of the workforce under Obama than ever in history. And he was saying that unemployment was less. Well, that's just because he wasn't counting the people that had completely dropped out of the workforce. And there was a significant number which made a record in history. You can look up these facts. I'll even put this in the description. Check us out at opinions.clovistar.com. And soon, February 5th, I will be doing our Disruptarian Radio at disruptarian.com. We'll have a weekly show, and we'll try to get more hosts on so we have a regular show, probably daily at some point. All right, bless up. This is Ryan at Clovis Star.